Ladies and gentlemen, this very special bonus episode will include friendships both old and new, feedback both constructive and auditory, and at least one very exciting announcement about created things.
Welcome to Created Things, the only podcast that features two dudes sitting on a couch in Florida. I am your co-host, Father Gabriel Toretta, Dominican priest, scholar of things, and this is my co-host, Jacob Flores Popchek, artist, psychotherapist, doer of things. How you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing so many things, dog. I'm doing so many things. You don't even know. This is so exciting. So this is the first time we've ever been in person to do this podcast. We are sitting on the same couch, in the same town, in the same state. I'm just looking at us in the camera, and this is kind of trippy because, I mean, literally, I don't think I've seen you in person since we started this podcast.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the last time that we saw each other in person was like at your wedding. So this is so expanding now into a podcast world is a brand new thing.
There was one. No, you came down right when we just started to do the podcast. You spent like 5 hours at my apartment, and we did a photo shoot that I've been culling for content for our Instagram since then. Just that one single photo shoot at my old apartment. But yeah, I mean, since we started the podcast, no actual visual encounter. And here we are sitting in my actual living room.
See, those who've been very fanatically, obsessively, frighteningly stalker level following our podcast, which of course I know probably tens of thousands of you already, which is, that's just how it is when you're famous, may have noticed, in fact, that in all of our promo material, in all of these amazing social media posts that Jacob is doing, that I'm in fact, the same clothes every time, and so everyone could tell that this was just one photo shoot, which is really embarrassing,
Right. I mean, you're making a joke about the fact that you do wear the same outfit every day, not unlike Mickey Mouse, but I actually am wearing the same outfit in every single photo that we post because of the exact reason that you're joking about. We normally, I kind of want to start with this. We normally do, because you were traveling so much, I travel so much, we often do a little spot called Where in the World is
Jacob and Father Gabriel.
You want to tell them where we are right now?
Well, currently we're sitting on a couch in a two dude friends who are very comfortable with themselves and each other, kind of like right next to each other kind of way, which is, a thing that you do. But we are sitting currently in Orlando, Florida. I have it on strong authority that there is an Everglade, which is apparently a thing that you can have a singular quantity of, which I did not know until yesterday. There is an Everglade just ahead of me. I am currently looking at it. Gentle listener, you cannot tell. However, the world is different when you are looking at an Everglade.
Yeah, we're also 3 minutes from Disney property, which means that, again, for fanatical listeners, it's finally happening. I'm taking Father Gabriel to a Disney park, to a theme park. We may not ever actually do an episode on that topic, but just so you know, I've sort of kind of won at least a battle, if not a war. It's happening, and I'm so excited. That's tomorrow. Today we're going to a beach and just in general doing a lot of celebrating. And the reason we're doing a lot of celebrating is because we have a really big announcement. This is a special bonus announcement episode. We have been working on this announcement for a couple of months now. Haven't gotten to share it with anybody. And before we tell you what the announcement is, we have a very special feller here to join us. He's the big man on top over at Catholic Ventures, over at the million strong Facebook group Catholic Creatives. Please welcome to Created Things, Mr. Matt Meeks. How you doing, Matt?
Good. How are you doing?
Hey, Matt, it's great to see you, man.
Good to see you too. I like being called a feller.
Yeah, you're a feller. You're a little varmint and a feller.
Well, it's good to be
So,
here.
Matt, I'm gonna give you the baton here. I'm gonna give you the scissors. Why don't you want to make the announcement for us?
Am I cutting the baton with the scissors or hitting
Yeah,
the
you're cutting the
scissors
baton.
with the
I'm mixed.
baton?
Okay. All right. Keep it back. You just started this job.
Yeah, happy to make the announcement. Yeah, we're really excited. So as you guys know, Catholic Creatives has been around for a few years. We've had a couple in-person summits.
Amazing experiences.
Yeah, really just wonderful time bringing the creative community around the world together. And we've got Facebook groups and a Facebook page where that continues, in real time, all the time. And we've kind of gone through a transition. So Catholic Creatives was started by Anthony and Marcelino D'Ambrosio and a team of wonderful people that had this vision and got it up and running. And Catholic Ventures has stepped in to help keep it going. And in that transition, we've kind of come to the conclusion that the beauty and the power of Catholic Creatives is its community and the great people who are a part of it and the people who feed into it. And so we put a pause on the official Catholic Creatives podcast for a little bit, and we're just kind of praying through and thinking through what is phase 2 of Catholic Creatives. Meanwhile, Created Things was making brilliant content and putting their podcast out. And it just seemed like a natural fit that these two great members of our community would come on board and be a podcast of Catholic Creatives and kind of help be contributing members of the voice of this community out to the world. And so we've had conversations over the last few months, and we're really, really excited to have Created Things be an official podcast of Catholic Creatives and a podcast of our community.
Yeah, dude, we're officially sponsored. We're officially the East India Trading Company has bought us out. We're owned by the man, but it's a good man. We like the man because Catholic Creatives is freaking rad. I will give my background with this. So I kind of was one of the first members of the Facebook group. I mean, first, 100, 150 members. I mean, not one of the first 3 or something like that. But back then, my good friend Catherine, who was working very closely, we had studied together at the Theology of the Body Institute, and she was working for the D'Ambrosios, and she had added me to the Facebook group like super early on. And I, got one of the first invitations to the actual first summit. Very exclusive, very sexy, guys. You have to know someone who knows someone. And yeah, it was amazing. It was everything I always wanted a Catholic conference to be. The conversations that are had in the group are super cool. The community and the people that it draws are super cool. And it was really just a safe place for different artists, both working in and outside the church, but who share a common spirituality, to vent to each other, to get ideas from each other, to support each other. So I've always been really impressed by both the mission and the way that mission is executed. And then Father Gabriel, I sort of snuck you into the second summit that happened like 2 years later. And then you sort of picked up with Catholic Creatives from there, including with the old Catholic Creatives podcast. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. So I think my first experience with the Catholic Creatives was that D'Ambrosios had me on with their the original podcast there. And that's a really powerful, really beautiful, long conversation about friendship, especially living with God, trying to unpack some of these ideas, the beauty of friendship, all of this. And it was, it was a powerful conversation. I really love getting to just kind of talk with them, think through these ideas together. And then this kind of new thing happened, which was that I kept meeting all of these different people, especially, people in the young adult group where Jacob and I met in Cincinnati, and then other people who would be reaching out to me online and things saying like, I heard you on this podcast and it was like really helpful. And this conversation was a great thing for me, et cetera. And I thought, this is really great. Like these people are like Catholic Creatives is giving people a chance to reflect on the beauty of their life, the way in which like God enables the human person to like work for beauty, discover beauty, like live a life of beauty. I mean, all of these different ways. And it was really amazing for me as somebody who, studies and thinks about beauty a lot, but doesn't unfortunately have really any artistic talent of any kind, to be able to be a part of it, to be able to enter into that conversation, and to reflect on it and really like share in this life of reflecting and speaking about beauty was really a great thing for me. It was really beautiful. And then it happened that one time, so the second summit down in Dallas, it just so happened that by the grace of God, I had been in Waco, Texas, and was just that day driving up to visit my sister in Dallas. And Jacob was like, well, I could just break you into this thing. And I thought, yeah, I have no creative talent, and I'll come. Yeah, absolutely. So I just sort of broke in and like hung out with these people for a while and had this amazing time. Also discovered, as one does, that like not only was this organization doing really wonderful things, but actually that most of the really amazing young Catholic artists I knew were there, in fact. So it was this great, exciting moment for me to see that, like, over the course of my life as a Dominican, I've gotten to know all these wonderful creatives, all these wonderful people who are like giving their life to make art, to make films, to make do photographs, and like all these kinds of things. And they seem to all be gathered in one place, which was just this powerful thing to realize, like, wow, there's really a community here that's forming, which I think is exactly the thing that a real Christian culture of thinking about the world and beauty really needs. So it was a great gift for me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was super happy to have you there. And I will say, as a side note, I mean, I wish you would stop just like undermining yourself that way, because you're a phenomenal writer. You say you have no artistic talent. You are a phenomenal writer. I mean, you produce a ridiculous Hamilton-esque level of content on a regular basis without even getting into your homilies in this podcast. So you are absolutely a creative in the truest sense. But that said, I'm just so honored to be representing Catholic creatives in this way by becoming kind of the first podcast of Catholic Creatives 2.0. And Matt, I want you to sort of speak to, if you don't mind, not that I'm inviting you to blow smoke up our asses or something, but I would love to hear you elaborate on what you felt about our content matched where you want Catholic creatives to be going in this new age of the organization. What attracted you to this, and what was complementary there to the mission that you're pursuing in this new iteration?
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to. So and let me, for people who don't understand kind of how Catholic Creatives operates behind the scenes, we have admins, like an admin team of volunteers that are really just like the lifeblood of Catholic Creatives. They put the posts out, they engage with people, they approve people, submitting to join the community. And it's all a volunteer-based thing. And the center of energy, of gravity of those admins is JP. And JP is
such a freaking badass. And he's explicitly asked that we never say his full name on the podcast, which is insane, but he is such a badass.
That's just JP. That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
But he is he just holds it all together, and he's phenomenal. And he has chosen that this is where he's going to pour his heart and his time and his energy into the church. And through doing this, and it's very appreciated. And so JP was the first. We were praying as admins. There's a few things we've been talking about since Catholic Ventures kind of stepped in and helped get Catholic Creatives kind of moving forward. And really, that's been a lot of behind the scenes work with the admins, which has been praying about who we are, talking to them about where we want to go. Talking about what does it mean to build not just communities of creativity, but communities of creativity like rooted in prayer and rooted in the Lord, so that God can flow through our creativity. And a lot of that started, as I was saying earlier, leaning towards like we need to look to the community before we just try to create things ourselves or spend money on things that like the admin group has an idea and let's just create a new podcast. And so we started doing that, and JP brought forward creative things. So I hadn't heard of it until JP brought it to us. And And he was just like, you have to check out their content. And I have no idea if it's even a possibility, but why are we talking about podcasts when they're doing the podcast? And so, so anyway, I listened, and I had all the admins listen, and we meet every month. So it was a month between us all listening and coming back together. And every single admin was like, oh yeah, that's it. Like, that's really good. We should talk to them. And so what is it about the content that I like? And I can only speak for myself. Like, the other admins chimed in and said, like, this is it, but I didn't get a lot of like, here's why. So I'll just give my why. I think that, and I gave a talk on this recently, but I think that when I reflect on like man being made in the image and likeness of God and what differentiates us from the rest of creation, there are two things, and that is creativity. Like, we create for the sake of creating. Other animals create for a purpose. And so that's one thing we do differently. And the other thing is our capacity for mercy. You don't see mercy, like mercy is supernatural. And I think just in knowing Jacob as a person and following him online for years, I've seen both of those in him in abundance, like him walking those two pieces. And so at first, when I was like going into the podcast, I was wondering, kind of how is that going to live and breathe through this podcast? But then I found myself just laughing all the time, So like, so then there was this humor element on top of that. It wasn't too serious, and it was it was bringing in things from the world and like super nerdy things from the world that only a few people know, but that's fine because that's what we need to talk about. That's where like culture happens. And so I wouldn't use I don't know if I have the right word for it. It's like there's a rebelliousness, and not so much that it is in rebellion against anything except for our own perceived structures of what art and the church should be. And so it was that piece too. So when you get this like union of creativity, mercy, friendship, rebelliousness, and humor, like all pouring into one thing, that is what I've seen in the Catholic Creatives community. And so it felt to me like this podcast was exemplifying what I loved about the community and why I was very excited for us to be a part of it.
That's so fantastic. I mean, it's really beautiful to hear it, like my own sense of like how art and all works in the church and its place of importance and like its gift for us as a vocation is it's like really informed by John Paul II's kind of rich understanding of this, that like that culture is not something that we like war against. Culture is not something that we like ideologically propose or impose, still less. But that culture is something we create, that we generate it. That culture is the way in which the human person shares together, reflecting on the mystery of what it is to be a human being, by living together, by the ethos that we build, by our experiences, and by the things that we create, how we create them, how we do them, and it was such a delightful thing for I have to give the credit. It was Jacob's idea very courageously to just say like, we should just try this podcast just as a pure as a kind of a pure offering, as a pure kind of creation, like not really expecting necessarily that anybody would really listen to it, not necessarily expecting that this would be the thin end of the wedge that transforms a Catholic culture or whatever, but just this arising from a friendship, arising from a gift of love that God had given us as friends, and then a love of beauty, a love of reflecting on the world, and a love of reflecting on the mystery of being a human being by the act of creation, and that it's just that I think that anybody has to offer. And it's that I think that I'm personally really excited, that exact dynamic that I'm personally really excited about being so dramatically at the heart of Catholic Creatives. So I feel like from my perspective, this is a great joy to be kind of like found in the heart of a community of people who are looking with I think what sounds to me like really just the exact same mission and the same love and the same hope that brought us randomly into this podcast in the first place. So it's a really exciting way of discovering a new way of kind of creating culture together, I think.
Yep.
And I want to thank you so much, Matt. I mean, that was such a honestly surprisingly affirming explanation. I thought you were going to talk about the podcast, and it was so kind of you to talk about me and us so much. But I do want to say, piggybacking on what Father Gabriel said, there really wasn't, and still is not, kind of by an act of sort of active will, any agenda behind this podcast. Father Gabriel and I live very crazy lives. He has pastoral duty, as Nacho Libre says. He has dead guy duties and priestly duties, and then I am kind of the third or fourth generation in a very chronically workaholic family. And I was talking to a couple friend of my wife and I was saying, yeah, I've been really like, I'm not sure how to explain it, but I've been really getting into like some art stuff that I'm like not doing to sell or to like build up my portfolio, and it's not even my style. It's just sort of like this quirky thing that I'm doing like when I'm too tired to do other work. And I'm like explaining at length, and the guy at the other end of the table goes, "You're describing a hobby. That's what you're talking about." And then like that blew my mind in half. I was like, oh shit, I don't even know what a hobby is. And so this podcast really came from an extension of Father Gabriel and I saying two things. One, that we needed a sort of workaholically justifiable way to keep our friendship active, where we're like, well, we can justify to ourselves talking at length once a week to each other and being friends if we sort of say it's a podcast, and we can like fit it in with the schema of our debilitating workaholism. But then the other part of it was me just really trying to do something that was just out of love and just for friendship, and wasn't to promote a portfolio or anything, which is often something we discuss in the podcast, that to be art rather than propaganda or porn or any of those things. What defines it is not so much a content difference, but rather a spiritual difference behind it, that art does not have an agenda. It's okay with you drawing multiple conclusions, and pornography, propaganda is inherently, we want you to take this one emotional experience away, and is manipulative as a result. And I think I would like to believe, and I think I hear this in what you're saying, Matt, that is that's what made this podcast, that we had no illusions was going to be a thing, and had no agenda for doing anything great in the church or anything lofty at all. Like, why that suddenly is adopted by you guys, because it was and is totally agenda free, and is just an exploration of our friendship, and is just an exploration of the arts and nerdy culture and on all those things that you talk about. I mean, that to me, having been to the summits, is, I think, a charism that's really important to the identity of Catholic creatives. We hear a lot in the various conversation threads, like, oh, is it okay that I'm a Catholic, but I'm doing this kind of art? Or is this thing okay to even watch or appreciate or participate in? And, I would like to think that in this second generation of Catholic creatives, we're reaching even further into the inherent okayness of authenticity and agenda-free creation. And I would like to think that this podcast represents that in some sense. I hope that's not too lofty. What do you think of this idea, though, of kind of freedom and authenticity in creation, pulling away from agenda, for the future of this organization? What hopes do you have specifically for that with the future of Catholic creatives and this podcast?
Yeah, it's a great question. And let me mark that and go back to it with one thing I realized I forgot to mention too. So in the process of the decision to bring you guys on and sponsor this podcast, Anthony and I have remained very close and are working and collaborating really closely together. And so for
Anthony
him,
D'Ambrosio.
yeah, Anthony D'Ambrosio. And so for him being one of the founders of the organization, I had him listen to this too. And he was like, yeah, this is phenomenal. So it's like,
Oh,
it
thanks, Anthony.
it goes all the way back, and in terms of that. So agenda-free creation, yeah, it's been something that I've struggled with in my process because I think I'm a creative at heart, but I got a business degree because my mom kept saying just like major in business or minor in business, when I kept jumping majors between all of the things that I wanted to geek out on. And and so I graduated with a business degree and I go into business, and that path inherently taught me, like, it just modeled to me the propagandistic side of creativity. How do you create things toward a purpose? That's what marketing is, in a sense. Like, you create beautiful visual things and you create quote unquote art, but art that drives towards that manipulates an emotion towards a drive to get somebody to fall in love with a product or a cause, or you name it. And so that's
a god.
Yeah. And then that's even translated into how I think about evangelization. Like, as a marketer, how do you think about creating beautiful things that cause somebody to fall in love with God? And that's flawed in its thinking, because beauty in and of itself arrests you in the moment to, like, into this beautiful presence that is God, or it points towards God. And so it's not, I think you can manipulate it to some degree, but I think that the most profound experiences are the ones that are authentic. And so it's been a creative journey of mine to break the bad habits that I've built as a marketer. Well, those are still good things to know, like on a natural level, like psychology and human behavior and all of those things enhance art. It's nice to know that, but to be able to set them aside and really fall back on God and trust God. And even the process of coming in and taking the helm of Catholic Creatives has been that, because I've had all these big dreams and ideas for Catholic Creatives, but I've chosen instead, through working with the admins and seeing certain things not work, that no, like, Catholic Creatives is a community of God and for God, and I need to take a step back and observe and see how he works through it. And then we find things like your podcast, so it's I think that's very important. I think the other thing that I was going to say that ties into your question, that ties into both of your questions, why the podcast and authenticity, is, so I worked in Hollywood for a while, and I was involved with the kind of, it was like called the web TV movement, but people who were creating television outside of the traditional television system. So, like, one of the original big shows was the Guild with Felicia Day, which was a TV show of Warcraft gamers that, like, had to solve real world problems outside of their house. And she couldn't sell that show to mainstream, but she sold it, like, she put it online, and then Xbox acquired it, and she made a ton of money because there was an audience, but traditional entertainment didn't see that audience. So there was all these people doing these types of shows, and I was very involved in that community and very inspired by that community. And one of the things that I learned is I witnessed, like, true creatives in a system. Like, you look at Michael Bay, he's the marketer who became he's the guy who creates towards a goal, which is money. And he knows how to create big flashy things that are like, it's movie porn, like explosion porn. And then people pay for it. But I wouldn't necessarily call it art. So I saw that side of Hollywood, and then I saw the side of people that were, like, grinding it out on the ground level, trying to create something that was just from their heart, but it didn't fit the system. And what I realized between the fake creative and the true creative, and it's not fair to call them fake. I think it's probably better to just call them the lost creative. What I realized between the lost creative,
become wayward in some sense, but still has the capacity for real creativity inside of them.
The lost creative and the true creative is, like, the true creative is, like, they are nerds, like, through and through. And it doesn't mean, like, nerds in the typical sense, but they have latched onto something. They are passionate about something, and they like explore every angle of that something, and they dive into that something, and they bleed that something, and they work through that something, and, like, they suffer with that something. And they'll talk your ear off about that something if you give them the chance, you know, and I mean, that's truly what a nerd is. Like, there's somebody who's so lost in the thing that they care about that everybody else is like, they're on the edge, you know? I have found, and really, like, what's buried in that is a particular genius. Like, it's something that has latched on, like, found beauty in something that they need to unlock and explore in their own particular way, or push through their own particular lens. And that's really authentic. And the people who lean into that rather than being the, you know, the lost creative who's like trying to be creative towards a purpose, or because they think it's cool, or because it gets them money, or because of all these other things, like the people who lean into their nerdiness are the people that I love. And the real, like, gems that I found in this community, the people that inspire me. And I got to tell you, you too have a real, like, breadth of nerdiness in you that, you know, like, you have leaned into so many things. Wide spectrum of just, like, you guys can geek out on so many things. So I love it.
I thank you for adding that, because I think that's also an important charism of the show. And I want you to talk about this, Father Gabriel, but I'm going to just set it up and throw it over to you, and you too, Matt. This charism of liking things that so often in popular culture anyway, Christians have been defined by the other's gaze, the secular gaze, and then also defined by their own sort of self-narrative as people defined by their otherness, by not liking things. You know, we don't do that. We don't like that. We don't watch that. We don't believe in that. We don't love that. And I hate defining anything by what it's not, right? I think there's something inherently flawed in that. I mean, with exception. And I think a real unspoken charism that we're trying to aim at in the podcast, we don't always do it perfectly, but it's just like the inherent goodness of really liking something, that is a spiritual exercise, that there's a charism to that. I would love to hear more of your thoughts explicitly on that, Father Gabriel, and then anything you want to throw on, Matt.
Sure. Yeah. You know, I think it's a helpful point. Like, I remember one time when I was in graduate school, the first time. So listen, you know how, like, this is a side note, you know how, like, these like ads from, like, the 80s and the 90s, it's like, hey kids, it's cool to stay in school. Like, I'm just gonna tell you right now, like, it's not. Okay, like, it's like after you've been through after you cross 10 years of postgraduate coursework, it is no longer cool to stay in school.
To quote, or to paraphrase Adam Sandler's Billy Madison, if staying in school is cool, then I'm Miles Davis.
This is yes, this is me. This is who I am. Yes, exactly. Yeah. But thinking about this, like, I remember, so I was thinking about this. Sorry, distraction. I'm distracting myself. I, you know, meeting all these new people, and somebody who was to become a very close friend of mine, the Polish Dominican friar. We had just finished a conversation with somebody, and he said, like, and I thought, wow, this person's, like, really insightful, really cool, like, really has a good sense for whatever. And, like, as that person walked away, he just said, like, did you notice that, like, every single person, object, or thing that came under discussion, that person proposed just the thing that's wrong with it, just that little thing that's wrong with it. And it was this, like, revelation to me, realizing that, like, oh my gosh, like, I have a bit of a natural tendency to do that myself, to find that, like, to distinguish myself, to show that I'm kind of smart, show that I understand things, I can analyze them, like, I'm the one who can figure out what's wrong with it, you know, like, everybody else wants to like it, but I can show you why you shouldn't like it, and those kinds of things. And, like, discovering that that's actually, like, a spiritual temptation, that's actually, like, a closing down of the heart, which in this context was a relational one. You know, it was like discovering the way that this was impinging on the freedom of somebody, but that I was also absorbing it as something that was impinging on my own freedom to respond to things in my own way. You know, it was very profound. It was, like, a real revelatory thing for me. And I can say, like, I've definitely had my own difficulties through the course of my life, like, being willing to just see something on its own terms. I can very profoundly, like with almost physical strength, remember the experience of like walking into like an art museum when I didn't know very much about art. My dad loves art. He was an art history major in college and would always take us to museums and stuff. And I would like walk into this room, and like my first thought wouldn't be like, do I like this? It would be going like straight to the artist's name to be like, is this a good artist or not? You know, in other words, like, should I like this or not? You know, and I remember having very profoundly the same sense about poetry. Like, I'm this very strong memory of being like in junior year of high school and like not knowing antecedently whether W.H. Auden was like a good poet that it was okay for me to like or not. And like as a result, being completely unable to actually enter into or engage with his poetry, like literally at all, you know? So I've definitely had these experiences of like having to come to terms with all of those things, like come to terms with the cheap trick of like just finding the thing that's wrong and pressing on that so that I look smarter or more creative or better or whatever. And then also overcoming like the suspicion of this suspicion of and fear of kinds of art that I don't know and don't understand. And so, the way that that's sometimes grounded out of like a mistaken sense of my Christianity. And sometimes it's just grounded out of like an imperfection in my own heart of various kinds. And so I feel like a lot of my own growing in Christianity, growing in manhood has been coming to that freedom to be willing to try to take something on its own terms, you know, to be able to just see it on its own terms and encounter it as such.
And I want to throw in too, and not at the expense of any point that you would want to make, Matt, but something that only just occurred to me as you were saying this is I think to do that, you have to embrace and even deepen charism, which is one of the kind of core of our podcast. You know, I'm a longtime student of theology of the body. It was very key to my entrance kind of into my own ownership of the faith. Your mentor was a Polish priest who was deeply steeped in actual like hardcore mainline black tar JP2 shit. So like the undercurrent of our podcast, I think, is a self-acceptance and a surety of our own goodness as created beings. Like my identity is as a created thing, right? That's sort of the main created thing that the podcast is about, is us being created things. And I think the fear of liking something ultimately comes from the fear that if I interact with something that is too nerdy or isn't well crafted enough, or is something that I could be picked on, or is something that I could find out 10 years down the line is quote unquote sinful, or whatever, you know, quirk or maladaptive belief you're bringing to the table, that somehow that thing could rub off on me and lower my dignity. And so I think the courage that we are trying to aspire to in the podcast, and the courage that we hope to inspire other people with to passionately like things and explore what they like and find the deeper spirituality and inherent mysticism behind the things they like and create more cool things that they like, is this understanding that I first, as a created thing, have such an integrated dignity that even if I discovered that the thing was somehow shitty down the road, it could not in any capacity lessen my identity as God's perfectly created thing. What do you think of these ideas, Matt? I'm really curious to have you throw in here.
I'm 100% with you both. Like we are called to sanctify the world with Christ, right? Like he flows through the church, his sanctifying being flows through the church, which includes all of us and our own unique desires and loves. And he reaches out through our hearts into the things that we care about and sanctifies them. And you know, I think of the mass as like the like, it's like the lungs of the world, except it's like the church breathes out oxygen, not breathing it in. So it breathes in the carbon dioxide, brings it into the heart, which is really like we lift up our hearts alongside the heart of Christ, put it on the altar. Those hearts are lifted up, sanctified, put back in us, and then oxygen is breathed out into the world. But it's breathed out in the world through the things that we care about. It's breathed out into the world through our loves. And so I think I've made the mistake, like I think as a novice in my love of God, you fall in love with how perfectly ordered he is and how perfectly ordered his church is, and in the systems and how beautiful they are, because you see systems in nature and you see systems in the church and you see systems in grace and you see these beautiful systems. And so it's easy to say in our like limited human mind, these things are outside of the systems and therefore they're outside of like God's desire for sanctification. And so I think it's easy to point out the flaws in others. It's easy to point out because then because then you can stay safe in the system that you love as a novice in this system. And I think we all make that mistake. Where I've found the greatest spiritual growth, and I'm still working on it, is to be totally comfortable pointing out those things in myself, but not seeing them in others, because I can't have gratitude. I think about the story of the Pharisee and the person outside the temple, where the Pharisee's going into the temple. Thank God I'm not like this person, right? And feels justified and grateful. They're saying, I'm grateful for
Thank
the fact.
God we're not like Michael Bay.
Right, exactly. I mean, I'd be happy to be like him. That'd be nice for a little bit.
At least one formality, yeah.
For like a day, it'd be good. But no, but thank God I'm not like this person. And then the person is saying I'm not worthy is the one who has the opportunity for true gratitude. And from true gratitude flows the abundance of grace and the abundance of the Christian life. It comes from a grateful heart. So yeah, I think what Father Gabriel was saying, I've gone through that process too, where you have to let go of these like rigid, I am this, I'm striving to be this, and I do it through these processes. And those who are outside of the processes, like I pity them, but thankfully I'm not them. And like, that is not of God. That is of the accuser. He uses the processes to accuse people. But yes, we are called to sanctify the world, and we are called in our own unique ways to do that through our hearts and like the things that we love, because God lines up right in what we love and it explores that with us and sanctifies it. And I think there are very few things that are unsanctifiable. There are things that are inherently sinful. Like there are things that are evil that can't be. But so much of that gets into the nuances of will and heart and what the person's intentions are. And those are things that the Lord sorts out with that person. So it's very important for us to just like lift up the good that we see. And in those confusing places where that person's wrestling with areas that they need to wrestle with God, we be there as a friend, and we might speak into it a little bit. But we need to constantly lift up the good, reinforce the good, water the beautiful, let that grow. And let that person on their path pursue that heart that is striving for God, and you just kind of guide it as a friend. And that's what community's for, so yeah, I resonate with everything you guys are saying. The other I have a tendency to rant a little bit, but the other thing I'll tell is a framework through which I look at the world often. I'm friends with a priest who's getting his he's a lifelong academic, Father Gabriel, like yourself. And he's now working on a PhD specifically diving into, he's a philosopher, like the book of life, and thinking of it like a play, and that God has written these roles for all of us. And I pushed back against him. We met in Rome, and something, as he was saying it, I just felt he was almost there, but it didn't feel right. And I'm obviously not. He's smarter than I am on this subject. But I said, I don't think it's a play. I think it's an improv. And I said, I think that God has given, like you go to an improv show and they have rules, like they call it playing improv, and they'll call out on the stage, like, give me a name, give me this, give me that. Those are the rules of the stage, but there's no script. And then the actors in their own creativity create a story from the rules. And I think that life is that, just that. God throws out these words, like these boundaries. And then he says, have at it. Like, he doesn't give us a script that's a rigid thing we have to follow. It's boundaries that our hearts play within. And he's there just kind of like laughing, like laughing and loving how we take that and create something new on the stage. So anyway, those are my thoughts.
I absolutely love that, because like this is something that I've just had to come to terms with so many times, is like that that like that like Jesus Christ is not fragile, like he's not a teacup. I'm not gonna like break him if I just like do something that's the teensiest little bit like wrong. I remember like this deep friend of mine who sort of helped unbind me of some of my own kind of moralistic closed-mindedness in various ways. Like I remember him telling me one time, like this was in confession, whatever, like confessing some dumb thing, and he just said like God doesn't need you to defend him. And I like blew up. I blew up because there's this complete transformation of mind. Like, whoa, but of course he does, because like, but I gotta, and I gotta do this, and I gotta, when people are wrong, I gotta tell them they're wrong, and all of this. And like, and don't, don't get me wrong, like calling attention to error and removing error, I mean, these are important parts of my life as a Dominican, and so there's an appropriate time and a place for this. But suddenly, but the point was, the emphasis here is doesn't need, it's the need, right? That like God is not so delicate and fragile that like if I don't throw everything I have into this one very particular framework, then like everything's going to be ruined and the kingdom can't come about, and like God's plans for the worlds are shattered, and like God had this like ideal top shelf version of the world, but like because I was so crappy in these things, and like I got into this kind of thing I shouldn't have gotten into, and like I learned to like poetry that I shouldn't have liked, then like now we're in this like 27th tier like plastic bottle, drop it on the ground and it won't break kind of $2 bottle of vodka version of life, and like I think I really had this idea that that was why I had to be so like narrow and so constrained within even like what I wanted to like, what I was willing to like, what I was willing to appreciate. Is this ultimately this fear that like somehow God depended on me to be exactly right, so that his world would be exactly the way that it was supposed to have always looked, just fitting this like play part just exactly right. Otherwise, like something was terribly wrong, and I hadn't ever thought of that image of like the improv, but I think that's actually very beautiful, because there is this like it points to this expansiveness of the heart, that like what is happening in Eden, for instance, is that like God creates the human person with the freedom to love, and that sin is always this cramping, this diminishment of the heart in its freedom to love, and that like our ability to grow as Christians is like ability to really see and understand and love God in the way that he manifests himself, and the way that like the world praises him, and the way that I am drawn into that in this just actually genuinely radical, like to the root kind of freedom.
Yeah. Well, I this idea of love, I mean, we talk about it so often. It's not like, I mean, almost too often, and yet we don't talk about it anywhere near enough, because especially when it comes, because a big component of Catholic Creatives, right, is posting our own art and getting feedback. In some cases, posting other art that we feel weird about and asking for help, people to kind of help guide us through it. But sometimes historically, and I think the admins, especially JP, have gotten really, really good at shepherding this in an authentically Christ-centered way. Sometimes that has historically dipped into mean-spirited criticism, right? And the group is at its best when we work together to kind of root that out. And it doesn't happen often. I don't want to scare people away from anything, but it happens every once in a while. And I think what you're talking about with love is so important, because actually, it's kind of secondary cool announcement. This week, we're going to be airing a very exciting interview with the actual creator of the Papyrus font, who is maybe one of the most criticized font designers ever in history. And we're super excited to be able to interview him, Chris Costello. And we've already recorded that interview. And, something we hit on with him is that to provide accurate artistic criticism, you have to love the thing. And you talk about improv, this is funny. The late Norm Macdonald used to say this about SNL as well, that you can't do an impression of someone. Your impression of someone will not be good if you do not love them, like deeply. And I think that's so important too, that both as we critique ourselves and each other as brothers and sisters in Christ, but also when we as artists critique each other's art, if it's coming from a place of, I don't like that, and that's not what I would have done if I had done it, then it's not going to be helpful criticism. Whether it's constructive, i.e. criticism that happens before the final product is released, or just completely non-constructive, where I've already released the product and you're giving me feedback that I can't possibly implement because it's in the world. No, right? No matter which side of the creative process that's on, if it's coming from that kind of place, it's not going to be helpful. It's not going to be, to use art school terminology, effective, or to use moral terminology, it's going to be desolative, right? In the sort of the Ignatian sense. But if I love you, and I really love your art, actually, whether it's the art that you've made or whether it's the art that you are, and I'm saying, wow, I love you so much, or I love that thing you made so much. And actually, I think it'd be even more effective if we adjusted the kerning on that font just a little bit, or if we pivoted the desire of your innermost heart just a little bit, or if we, brightened the contrast just a titch, or if you thought about or prayed about it this way, right? That's real, authentic, quote unquote, constructive criticism or artistic feedback. And it starts, again, with that self-security in my own identity as a created thing of God's loving artistic hand, and out of a genuine love, both for the person and for the cool art that they made. And I want to pivot the conversation soon to the future of Catholic creatives, because I know a lot of people are going to be listening to this episode for that reason, interested what they can look forward to and things like this. But I will just say for myself, I'm really hopeful in kind of a spiritual jubilee year type of a way that we're entering a new phase, both in Catholic creatives and more broadly. You, Matt, talk a lot about Catholic creatives being a catalyst for Renaissance in the church. And I'm hoping by extension that we're entering a new phase in the church where criticism or feedback, I guess I'd prefer to call it feedback, comes from that authentic place of, holy crap, I love that so much. I love you so much. And wouldn't it be even more effective if blank?
Yeah. And I'd love to get into the future of Catholic creatives. And just to conclude my thoughts on it, Jacob, I think the thing that's been central to my discernment in working for the church, and the thing for which I probably work the hardest, often with myself before I'm able to do it with others, is like Jesus's final prayer in John 17. So this is his priestly prayer. This is what he is offering himself for. And he's praying to the Father for unity among his apostles, among his followers, down the line, unity for us, unity rooted in him. And I think as we discern criticism, or as we discern journeying with a person, or journeying with a work that someone's doing, or any of those things, we need to ask ourselves, is what and how I'm communicating working towards unity, or is it driving division? And because if you are a passionate lover of the heart of Jesus wants unity in his church and among his people. And he sees in his church, he gives us as a family. And so it's familial unity. He wants a family united. And so I think it's just like in giving, so when Jacob's talking about love, you have to love. You have to recognize that every conversation you're having with your brother. Every idea that you're generating, if somebody else has already done that idea and they're doing it well, and then you do it, you are now competing with your brother, or your sister. And these are things that you really have to take to heart and converse with them. Like if somebody's doing something really well and you want to do it, go to them and work with them, build unity before driving division. And I think it's so easy for us to separate from the other or their work or their thing from our own framework. And really all that does over time is isolate ourselves. So anyway, those are my thoughts on that. Just from a discernment standpoint, it's like unity is so important. And that's why I think the community of Catholic creatives is important. That's why I think the friendship the two of you have is important. Like this is how we need to model the Christian life. And from that flows joy. And then you think about, it's in, one of the letters of Peter, but give cause for your joy or give cause for your hope. Like people are attracted to Christianity because they see how joyful and hopeful we are. They see the community that we create, the family that we love. It's not attractive because we have regimented systems for operating, though those regimented systems are beautiful and good. So I'm not meaning to say they're bad. They're very good. But the union that we create is the light that shines out from who we are. So yeah, the future of Catholic creatives. Let's do that.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Please.
No, but yeah, on the realistic side, on the future of Catholic creatives, Catholic Ventures is the organization that I oversee. Catholic Creatives is a part of Catholic Ventures. Catholic Ventures, we even had a conversation with this. We had like a big, branding meeting with my team, and we were like, when do we talk about Catholic Ventures? Because it just sounds so corporate. It's like we don't like. It's more like Catholic Adventures, I guess. Well,
that takes me back to VBS 1999.
There you go. But what are the creative things we can do to build community, to build unity, to lift up the church? Obviously, the world is built on, we have to make money to make these things happen. So how can we create businesses of these things that support each other? And that's really what Catholic Ventures is trying to figure out. Catholic Creatives is a core part of that. We have, the store, which is a store that lifts up makers. So we lift up creatives and help expose them to a large audience of people. If anybody in the community is interested in us helping to promote your product to a ton of people, let us know. We want to grow our admins and really help people understand that being an admin of Catholic Creatives is like a missionary effort. It's something that people give their time and hearts to. So if you have an interest in pouring into this community and being an admin, let us know. We're going to do a lot more to lift up our admins. That's something we've been talking about. And then also support our admins with communities of prayer and things like that. We've been talking a lot about doing regular prayer for the larger community, and recognizing that people pray in different ways. So I think I want to unite religious with Catholic creatives, like the lay members of Catholic creatives, because we have a number of religious members too. So a dream of mine over the next few years would be to have, as God works through the different charisms of religious orders, to have different prayer groups led by different religious that members of Catholic creatives can be a part of. And I think more of this, finding the work in not driving Catholic creatives from the top down, but having a healthy kind of bottom up mentality where the work that shines within Catholic creatives is the work of the community and lifting up the voices of the community. And then finally planning towards the next summit. So I think that's the
lifeblood. Next summit is the biggest thing too, because I'm worried. So Ricky, he's a great guy from Arc Creative. He works with you guys a lot. He will have, by the time this conversation with you airs, sort of promoting a great big announcement of Catholic creatives, i.e., the adoption of this podcast. And I'm mildly worried on the periphery of my brain that people are going to be disappointed because they're hoping it's the announcement of the next summit, which I can assure you that I would not, I could not be more excited for when that inevitably does happen. But if I can offer some consolation, one of the things that was most exciting to me about this relationship between Created Things and Catholic Creatives, Catholic Ventures, is that when people, you guys have sort of created it or designed it so that when people support this podcast via the Catholic Creatives Patreon, they will be directly contributing both to resources that support artists on the ground level, and also which directly go to financing and designing the next summit to be, hopefully the best summit we've ever had. And I think the fact that this isn't just like, oh yeah, we have a podcast now and it's two white guys, quirked up with the sauce and you can go listen to it, right? But rather it's like, no, this is a freaking direction, man. And like we're actively contributing something, and you're contributing something and being a part of this by contributing to something. I just feel excited knowing that when someone donates this podcast, that money isn't going to me. That money is going to a summit that I might be able to attend sooner than later. So I say that both to sort of comfort people that is happening, that is definitely happening. And two, to invite people to kind of get in on the ground level. Matt, would you mind just, as we sort of wrap this up here, just telling people how they can be supportive of those long-term agendas and these dreams that we have for this organization and for this podcast?
Yeah, first and foremost, pray for Catholic Creatives and pray for this community and pray for God's work, his creative work through the hearts of his people. Second, we try to be a nexus for all of that. And so go to catholiccreatives.org or catholiccreatives.com. Both will get you to the same place. And on our website, we have a support tab, which allows you to join our Patreon and support this podcast, support Catholic Creatives, support these initiatives. We, and particularly drive towards the next summit. That would be the primary way. We have contact information on the site. So if other people have things that they would like us, like other ideas or other things that they're working on or things that we should be aware of, please contact us and let us know. And I think that'd be the best place, catholiccreatives.com, and then support.
And I will also say, you can get in touch with us if you join the Catholic Creatives Facebook group, which obviously is free to join. You guys have generously now made me and Father Gabriel both admins on there. I mean, we want to take kind of a back seat to what you guys are doing, so we're not going to be actively, posting all the time or approving posts necessarily. But if you guys have something that you want us to talk about on this podcast, or if you have something you'd like to talk about on this podcast, like, we have a real goal. We're talking about the goals of Catholic Creatives, but we have a real goal to feature people on this podcast who would never be featured on any other Catholic program, but who have something really profound to say about the arts and really profound to say about faith. And so if you're one of those people and you're saying, man, I've been making like this crazy art in my garage that witnesses to the incarnation or something, or, get in touch with us, like message the group, join the group, become an active poster. We really want to facilitate community with you personally, uniquely. And I want you to consider this a sincere invitation from both me and Father Gabriel and everybody at Catholic Creatives. We want you to be part of the family.
And if I could say one thing too, on the Facebook group there, when you submit to become a member of the group, it asks you like 2 questions. That like, why are you choosing this group, and some basic stuff. Please fill out those questions. I think a lot of people just submit to join the group and don't answer it. And the admins have a policy that if you don't take the time to answer the questions, you're not going to take the time to feed into the group. So those people generally get denied. And I think a lot of good people get denied from joining the group because they don't take the time to just respond why they want to be a part of the group. So please take the time to do that so that you can get into the group. And I do think it's important because the group is something that we desire people contribute to. So, but yes, join the Facebook group, fill out those questions, jump in, start interacting with people, engaging with people, and we'd love to have you.
Thanks so much, Matt. I feel like this is just an exciting moment for Jacob and I with creative things. It's an exciting moment for Catholic Creatives. I love what Catholic Ventures is doing. I'm grateful for all the work that you've been doing, and it's a gift to be a part of it. So we just give it to God, that we want to enter into this reality of like this genuinely new venture that, as you say, like, is a real adventure, to try to create culture, to allow to form around us the culture of Jesus Christ, in whom and with whom we want to live. And it's a gift for us to be able to be part of this, to be able to be in this great partnership with you, Catholic Creatives and Catholic Ventures. So thanks, Matt, and to everybody who's listening, anybody who's watching, people who we hope very earnestly to be able to get to know, to be able to get to be inspired by your creativity, to be able to get to be inspired by the created things that come from your heart. I'm looking forward to the adventure with you. So go forth and create cool things.
You've been listening to Created Things, a podcast of Catholic Creatives, hosted by Father Gabriel Torretta OP and Jacob Flores Popchek, produced by Jessica Flores Popchek and Kyle Meineke. To find out more about how you can support the podcast and other ventures for artists, visit catholiccreatives.org/support.